So this is our off-grid house. We're very close to a village called Kemble in Ontario, and Kemble is a little north of the city of Owen Sound, which sits on Georgian Bay as part of the Great Lakes. And as you can see, it's a very pleasant area, lots of trees. Now, if you look at the house, you'll see a few interesting things immediately. One, there's obviously some solar panels, and so you can guess that potentially this is an off-grid house, but also those large windows below it is part of our passive solar system, and the odd angles of the roof, it's there to help us catch rainwater to give us vital water that we need to live. And this house actually has a very interesting story behind it. It was designed and built by a Dutch-Canadian artist named Hans Albarda in 1979. And he's considered a pioneer of sustainable home building within Canada. And this was his very first one. He had envisioned a comfortable and largish house that was also fully sustainable, that you could live here without being connected to the electrical grid, without being connected to any of the typical services that most homes enjoy in the city. So very forward-looking place, and we find it an incredibly engaging experience to live here, and indeed it is actually quite comfortable. So here you can get a better view of the solar element of our house. There you see five photovoltaic panels. That's enough to generate on a good sunny day, about a kilowatt at any given time. And that's enough to do a whole range of different things, like having modest refrigeration, electric water pumping, some music here and there, as well as reasonable amounts of light. Now, the windows, the large windows you see below it, is part of our passive solar design element. And what that does is this wall is facing south. So we get a lot of sun this way. And in the winter, those large windows allow the sunlight to come in and then warm up the house. And the house itself actually has a fair number of concrete walls, which has a fairly high thermal mass. And once things warm up, it stays warm, or opposite in the summer, when things are cool in the evening, it keeps that coolness and doesn't heat up during the day. But in the winter, that room that you see inside the passive solar is actually quite pleasant and quite comfortable. So this is the electrical power center, and the large white box that you see to the right is basically the inverter plus a few other components. And that's what takes the DC electricity coming in from the solar panels and makes it into AC, and then distributes it throughout the house. You can see to the top, the narrow box, that's the charge controller for the solar panels, and it basically regulates the charging process for the solar. And you also can see to the left what appears to be standard electrical panels. And so basically what happens is, here, when the solar electricity is generated, it gets properly transformed into AC, regular AC electricity, then just gets distributed. And as far as living here, the electricity simply flows exactly the way you would expect it to in a normal house. Now, if we take a closer look at the inverter panel, you can see there's a bunch of different data on there. To the top right, you can see the current voltage level, and it's actually quite late in the day. The sun is quite low, so the voltage is not terribly good. And you can also see a blinking red light. That means I have to give it a bit of maintenance a little later on. And you can see these 4 batteries, large batteries, are what stores our electricity when we have surplus during the day from the solar, or in fact, if we need to power up the generator. There's 4 6-volt deep cycle batteries, and together they nominally produce about 24 volts. And again, that's enough to have a reasonably comfortable civilized life here. And here we can see our backup generator. So this can either provide direct inverted AC power in case we want to plug in something outside, but more interestingly, you can see the heavy cable coming out of it and into the house on days when we don't have a lot of sunlight, or in the evening after, if we have some company and we use a fair bit of electricity, we can actually turn on this generator and it will recharge the house. Typically, on a normal occasion, we really don't have to run it for more than maybe 30 minutes for it to recharge batteries, even after a bit of a busy evening or a very gray day. And as you can see, the roof line itself has a very interesting set of angles, and that's actually meant to catch rainwater. So unlike homes in the city, we are not connected to any municipal source, nor are we connected to any form of a well dug into or drilled into our property. You got to remember, we have nothing but rock underneath, so it's actually quite difficult to get to water. But with the right type of rain catchment and the right filtering, we're actually able to enjoy a reasonable amount of decent quality water. And if you notice, there's a large PVC pipe coming from the eaves trough on our roof, and that's actually the intake for the rainwater that we catch. And in fact, here and there you'll notice other piping, and that's fundamentally for runoff or overflow protection. And here is the intake of the water that comes from rain that catch through the roof. And that large cylinder that you see is called a vortex filter, which does the first level filtration. Then the water from there goes into this sump, which is a small concrete container that allows some sediment to settle. And then once it reaches a certain height, there is a pipe that runs through a main, runs to a main cistern within the house, and that's what stores the main water.
And what you see right now is the top of the main water cistern that's inside the house. The green cap, the big round cap you see in front of you, is the lid, and it covers a cistern that holds about 2,000 liters of water that's already been initially filtered. But then from here, it goes through another stage of filtering. And those are the cylinders you see in the back, and the smallest filter there goes down to 1 micron, and that gets the water clean enough for us to basically use it for household use. That pressure tank on the side shows that we actually have proper pressurized and electrically pumped water in here. The water pumps are on the left, and all of that is powered by the electricity that we generate from solar.
Now, the one thing about living off-grid is heat in the winter, and of course it's very cold around here. And what we do is, because we have a substantial amount of trees in our area, we harvest our own firewood. We tend not to take down live trees. There is enough there are enough trees that fall of natural causes. For example, this very large sugar maple tree succumbed to the pressures of a major windstorm we just had, and as you can see, it fell over. We have already cut a fair bit from this tree, and that gives us a fair bit of firewood. We're still not done yet, and in fact the remainder that we need to harvest will probably heat us for an entire season. We can get a fair bit out of naturally occurring wood that we can harvest. And one of the more fun parts about living here is this wood cook stove. So this is a full cooking stove and oven. You can see the large oven door on the right, and you can cook and bake and roast the same way that people did over 100 years ago. But this actual particular model is a more updated, modern version of it. Yes, there are modern wood cook stoves, and these were made by people that we call the Amish or the Mennonites, who continue to live in very traditional ways, and they've actually maintained some level of technology improvement in the wood cooking technology. Really fun, cooks very well, takes a little bit of effort to learn how to use it properly. And this odd looking bit of pipe that is coming out of the ground is the air intake for a geothermal line that we have. So basically this large PVC pipe goes down probably about 2 meters below the freezing depth of soil in our area, and in the summer that actually provides some natural cooling as the cool ground air flows into the house. And in the winter, because that part of the ground never freezes, it also brings in warmer than freezing temperature air, which also helps warm up the place and keeps it from freezing if we're not home and the weather is quite cold.
What you see here is the hot water storage tank. And the water is heated in two ways. One is through the solar boiler, which is on the roof, and on sunny days it heats water through the heat of the sun, and that the water then fills this tank. And the other way is from our wood burning stove, our cook stove, which in the winter is generally on, and that has a pipe, water pipe that runs through it, through the firebox, which then gets heated. And this tank here is simply a storage tank. It does not have any direct heating elements on the inside, which is what most people in typical modern homes have, a tank with an actual heating element. This one is just purely storage. It's big enough for us to have enough hot water to do anything we want to in terms of dishwashing and bathing and such. And one of the most special aspects of this house is that it sits on what is called the Niagara Escarpment. The escarpment is a geological structure that snakes through southern Ontario, and it's a very large ancient set of cliffs. And in fact, if we go over here, you can see a little bit of it. Our property actually sits on top of the escarpment, so we are on top of a cliff. This cliff is actually the same cliff that runs through Ontario and then ends up in Hamilton near the McMaster campus, and then continues all the way to Niagara Falls. So that's our house. I hope you enjoyed the brief tour. And again, we're not too far away from Hamilton or Toronto, so maybe if you find yourself having a pleasant country drive around Owen Sound or thereabouts, please stop by, and we'd love to show you around a little bit more. Okay, thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye.